Pandit Exodus Day through KOA's ZoomDub platform. Let me introduce the ZoomDub program a little bit. It was a program which we started last year to connect the global Kashmiri community together to discuss and to debate the critical issues which are, surrounding us with a wider awareness and possible solutions. The name is reminiscent of the ZoomDub, which was a program conceived by the legendary Pushkar Bhan as we were growing up and listening to that early mornings. This year, we will continue to evolve ZoomDub and bring more bring issues which are associated with the social, cultural, and the current affairs pertinent to the KP community globally. So to start the program this year, we are gathered here today on a very historic event that is the 32nd years of our forced exile from the valley, its impact on our community, and a way forward. January 1990 will go down the history as one of the darkest days in Kashmir. A cold, dark, terrorizing night when humanity came to a standstill and hatred ran wild in the streets of Kashmir, when the evil of intolerance showed its ugly face, and our minuscule community was trapped inside our homes, desperate to be saved. The night passed excruciatingly slowly, and by that morning, Kashmiri Pandits saw very clear writing on the wall, and as a result, fled for the fear of their lives and to save their honor. In the days and months that followed, we would become refugees in our own country, living in tattered tents in the migrant camps of Jammu. Some of us fled to other parts of the country. Our lives were filled with desolation and hopelessness. And at that time, we did not have any ray of light in front of us. We did survive, but paid an enormous price for that survival. What is remarkable is that our community turned that pain and suffering into opportunities. We did not get angry, we did not turn it into hatred, we did not turn to guns and violence. Our journey started from the dust of destruction of Exodus, but we turned it into creation of a better world and a newer world for ourselves. While we continue to rebuild our lives, we have at the same time to recreate and rebuild our community, which is scattered globally. We have to create a collective identity as well as a collective pride, and at the same time create support systems, particularly for those who are less fortunate among us. So today's discussion will be focused on identifying the challenges which are in front of us, ahead of us, and find common ground and solutions so that our community will move forward. The barbaric killings last year in the valley is a stark reminder of the fear and uncertainty which hovers on our communities and minds even to this date. Our primary objective is thus to make sure that the lives in the valley of Kashmiri Pandits who have decided to stay back there and who by reasons of their jobs are still in the valley, those lives are protected. And at the same time, it is very important for us to spread awareness, awareness among different populations and cultures of the world, within and outside India, and set the narrative into a right narrative, the actual history of Kashmiri Pandits. Now, the major questions which are always on our mind are how do we preserve our heritage and keep a strong record of our history when our heritage and our culture is constantly being influenced by stronger cultures now that we don't live in our valley and are away from our roots. At the same time, our history is being erased by the perpetrators. They are making every attempt to make sure that our history gets diluted and it gets corrupted by a very false narrative sometimes. The other question which is on the minds constantly is will there be any collective justice for the crimes perpetrated against us? Our older generation, grandparents, and many times our parents, they have passed on yearning to go back to their homes. Will we have another generation perish longing to go back home and die in their own homes? But in short term, our priorities are upliftment of our community members who have not been so fortunate, who are still living in those camps, and they need care, and we need to make sure that their lives and they get the same opportunities that the rest of us have. So without much ado, let me acknowledge and welcome today's esteemed panelists and artists who are going to be a part of this program. Let me welcome Sri Sushil Pandit. Thank you, Sushilji, for attending today's program. Sushilji is a renowned historian and intellectual. Let me welcome Dr. Vijay Sazawal, who is a political analyst and has worked very closely with our community in India. Shri Ashok Pandit, thank you Ashokji for joining. He is a renowned filmmaker, a social activist, and a political commentator. Mrs. Aarti Singh Tikku, who is a senior Indian journalist, founder and editor of The New Indian. Let me also welcome Mrs. Meena Thakru, who is a relation to Sri late Tiglal Taplu, Mrs. Aarti Kaul, and Mr. Rakesh Kaul. Before I go on to introducing Aarti ji, let me introduce our host and moderator for tonight, Mr. Sanjay Kaul. Thank you, Sanjay ji. Sanjay ji grew up in Delhi. He completed his engineering in NIT Srinagar, master's at Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, New Delhi, and an MBA from US. Sanjay ji has worked across the globe in India, Middle East, and now in US. When he was in Kashmir, he was a very passionate and active theater artist and a radio programmer. Currently, he is an entrepreneur in a healthcare space and is based in New Jersey. So before we begin today's program, let us close our eyes and immerse ourselves in the mesmerizing and soothing voice of Aarti Tikku Kaul, a legend, who is singing a song about Kashmir. Mrs. Aarti Tikku is a household name. Everyone knows who she is. She has written, she has sung innumerable Kashmiri albums, which are very popular. Aarti is associated with KOA in many roles, has been a cultural director in the past, and currently she is our senior mentor in the cultural team. Aarti will be singing a song which she has written herself, and she'll be speaking about what prompted her to write this song and the journey behind it. Aarti, over to you.
Namaskar to all of the panelists here, to the wider Kashmiri Pandit brothers and sisters living across the globe. A very somber day, a day that reminds us what happened 32 years ago. I guess this song, which I wrote at the time, it happened within a span of a couple of hours, and it just came out because at the time my parents were in Jammu trying to sell off their home, the only home that I had known. I grew up in that home. My education, my thought process, my cultural interaction, my language and everything seemed to have been associated with that home. And that was the time when I thought that life is just going to fall apart for me for that period of time. I was away. I was here in US. So it happened that the words just came out. It had its own rhythm somehow. It had its own rhyme and rhythm and everything. The musically, I composed it after a few years. So I'm going to sing a few verses of that song. You guys have, I think everybody has at least heard it here and there. Pakan pakan taraugar Yus esi romut Yus esi tromut Milith sari sandau sugar Milith sari sandau sugar With you sari taraugar Lokote mokote osum sugare Lokote mokote osum sugare Hoşeye vundu sondare sugare Lakcharas yete gyundna korum Be akilate vuchha sugar Be akilate vuchha sugar Vichu sari taraugar Pakan pakan taraugar Tas kya mol yesna rudi kare Tas kya mol yesna rudi kare Gash rositayzan achilachitare Vanchum basan vango mar Be akilate vuchha sugar Be akilate vuchha sugar With you sari taraugar Pakan pakan taraugar Yus esi romut Yus esi tromut Niyat sari sondau sugar Kar raun gau mein marn khat sa Gar raun gau mein marn khat sa Ani gati chas pakan ramswa Ani gati chas pakan ramswa Look gare chas bihit wan kya kar Be akilate muchha sugar बेअकिलते बुझ सुकर with you sari taragar pakan pakan taragar yus aise romot yus aise tromot milit sari sando sugar मिलित सरी थांडो सुगर मिलित सरी थांडो सुगर
आप म्यूट पे आरती जी.
That was my contribution, I guess,
That was a beautiful
to
contribution.
the pain and the suffering which I experienced at the time, and I know it is a pain and suffering which we carry, have been carrying in our hearts for so long. That's the only way I could express it and wanted to share with the entire community. Thank you so much again, Archana.
Thank you so much, Aarti ji. It was so profoundly touching and soul-rendering, honestly. It brings tears
Thank
to
you.
the eyes. Thank you very much.
That was that was a wonderful, wonderful and a touching song.
Thank you.
It was in Kashmiri, but no translation was needed. So काफी जो लोग आज इकट्ठा हैं, उसमें काफी ऐसे लोग भी हैं जो कश्मीरी नहीं जानते. So basically, the main point in the song was, मैं अपने उस घर को देखना चाहती हूँ, उस घर को जाना चाहती हूँ, जो मैंने कई बरसों से, कई दिनों से खो दिया है. I will not go into the whole translation. Yes. So, hello and welcome everyone once again. It has been a touching and emotional journey for many of us, or most of us, since the Exodus, or even before. Thank you, Archana ji. It's a real honor and privilege to be a part of KOA and ZoomDub initiative today. I'm really glad to kick off this event in 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be a busy evening and morning for many of our viewers who are eagerly waiting to hear the experts. I would also like to thank our global audience who are in different time zones. And in India, it is definitely early for a lot of folks. So before we begin, let me lay down the format or the structure of the program and some ground rules. I have put 12 to 15 minutes of total time for each of the panelists. Typically, there will be 2 questions for each panelist, and they may not be necessarily one after the other. I also have a rapid wrap-up round, not a rapid fire round. There's only one question. And this is the same question for each panelist. Think of it as a surprise round. You will have 3 to 4 minutes to respond to this question. And I request everybody to stick to the time guidelines. Time permitting, we will have questions in the end that we receive from the global audience in the chat. And you can put them in the chat and our team will basically curate them or share them with you for answer. We will begin today's program with Sushil ji. Welcome once again. Sushil ji, बहुत आपका स्वागत है इस ZoomDub में. And Sushil ji actually needs no introduction to any Kashmiri Pandit. A historian and intellectual. He's the founder of and CEO of Hive Communications India Private Limited. We all know him predominantly as a Kashmiri leader and a firebrand activist who has voiced strong opinion on Kashmir issues time and again. And he has made the story of Kashmiri Pandits known worldwide and relevant on many platforms. मेरा सवाल सुशील जी से ये है, his perspective on Kashmiri culture, Indian culture is amazing. Last 70 years, a lot has changed in the valley. Actually, last 6 to 7 centuries, a lot has changed in the valley. So the question is, how does the Exodus change things for the young generation? Their association with Kashmir, culture, language, tradition, so much has changed. And by young, I mean the generation who never lived there or who left it very early, never visited the birthplace of their ancestors. Sushilji.
Namaskar, everyone. I'm grateful for this opportunity, Archanaji, and your team for organizing this event.
Thank you, Sushilji.
It is indeed a very poignant moment and made even more um, uh, let's say, poignant by the very opening song for this event. I felt transported to my own home that I have not been able to see for several years now. And as rightly pointed out, this is the story of more or less each one of us. What to talk of those who, as you said, Sanjay ji, haven't been through this experience because they haven't lived in the home there to lose one. And they perhaps live through our experience. But there are several other markers to one's identity, not just the home that you live in, but also the language you speak. Even if not the language you speak, because you've been deprived of that language also in the milieu you live, the parents you belong to, you're born of, the identity you carry in your name, on your face, who you think you are, and where you come from, the legacy, the history, the tradition you represent. There are far too many markers to one's identity that you don't lose, even if you lose your home, even if you lose your milieu, your habitat, even if you lose sometimes your language and are reduced to a nodding acquaintance with it. There is still something very innate, sometimes very indescribable, that you feel you are. And I see the pangs of it in the fourth generation Caribbean Indians when they come searching for their villages, when they come searching for their ancestral homes. In vain, most often, in Eastern UP and Bihar, and I've met such families. So it doesn't matter when it will strike you, but the pangs of who you are and where you come from and where your roots are very deep and very painful when they do strike. It's a matter of time what triggers it, maybe a song. And you must see the literature in exile, you must see the poetry, you must see the expressions of those who've been condemned to forsake their lands and homes and culture and habitat and even an entire life. Very often the memory itself, because it is being systematically erased, and we are forced to make a deal with the circumstances we find ourselves in the name of reconciliation. You know, this word, which is otherwise a wonderful word, but the way it is being bandied about, not so much by the enemy, not even as much by the friends, quote unquote, but some of us within the community who are trying to push us into some kind of a compromise, into some kind of an arrangement literally, into some kind of a negotiation where the people who are supposed to negotiate with are most reluctant. They haven't asked for those negotiations. They haven't asked for that reconciliation. It is entirely one-sided. But that's how we're being pushed in the name of a patch-up. People make films and say, forget and move on. People write books and say, it's time to make peace. Make peace on what? There is not even an acknowledgement. So for the new generation, I think there is no other option but to carry the baton. If it is reduced to a relay race, if it is reduced to a struggle that has to be carried on for generations, then so be it. We cannot compromise our truth. And our truth is that we have for generations suffered a genocide. There is no better word, no more comfortable word or palatable word to describe what we've been through, search as I may. Because for the past 600 years, we've been reduced to cipher in the valley. What happened in 1990 wasn't even achieved by Aurangzeb. And unfortunately, it happened in a democratic, unified country of more than 900 million with 1.5 million strong armed forces, security forces, a system of courts, right down from Supreme Court to high courts to session courts and magistrates, to a vibrant press, a strong parliament of almost 800 MPs, an elected prime minister, declaration of human rights. In this day and age, we saw a replication of that genocide which we've been facing for centuries, and making all kinds of alibis for it, that we were not united and we were far flung and we had no constitution and we had no armed forces and we had no resources and we were under alien rulers. All those alibis are not available today to explain what happened to us in 1990 all over again. And how can we let that forget? How can we let that be papered over by our young ones? What do we tell them? Why aren't we in our homes? Why aren't we in the place where we belong? Short of concocting a lie or just making vague explanations, I think telling the truth is going to be the most liberating part, and also an honest one, because they need to know what happened if they are not supposed to suffer it all over again, as we have through generations. Very often history denied, history concocted or distorted, repeats itself as an ongoing tragedy, as an unmitigated disaster, which is what is being done to us. So we need to get culturally more connected. Today, it is possible more than ever before. The technology enables it. As we are talking today to each other, separated by vast oceans and continents, real time, we also are connected through a vast knowledge and information which is available to us more conveniently than ever before.
Thanks.
So there is no excuse not to know who we are, who we were, and there is a lot more to be discussed. Fine, becoming a great engineer or a doctor or a scientist is a beautiful goal to have in life. But let's also become historians, researchers, sociologists, poets, authors, people who deal with civic issues, about laws, about anthropology, about culture, and connect to one's roots. We see people in diaspora keep alive their identity, keep nourishing their roots through great trouble, but yes, successfully. Those who've been wandering about the world for centuries have been eventually able to get a homeland. Why not us?
Okay.
And I think we need to keep the fire burning. We need to keep our children aware, abreast, and equipped with who we are and where we belong.
Thank you. Thank you, Sushilji. I think I got a lot in that answer. And the second question that will come to you in the second round is related to that. So I'm generally getting the drift of the direction you're going. Thank you very much for elaborating on this. Going to the second panelist or the speaker or the guest for today is I'm going to Dr. Vijay Sazawal. Namaskar and good evening, sir. Vijay ji, I think Aarti ji introduced him in the beginning, but I'm just going to say a couple of lines. Apart from having a doctoral degree in engineering, a founding member and past president of Indo-American Kashmir Forum, most of us know him as a popular political analyst and overseas coordinator of multiple Kashmiri expatriate organizations that are based across Ottawa, London, Geneva, and US. And he has been addressing KP plight across the world and working very closely with the Indian community back in India. So that's the interesting part, because we all know the tremendous contributions he has made for this cause in American political corridors, and also very closely connected with Indian politicians, bureaucracy, government, and so on. So my question, Vijayji, for you is, I also know that you're very closely connected with what is ground reality in the Valley. You know exactly what is happening. Article 370 has gone. We have a lot of changes. There is some killings that happened that was a sad part of the whole thing. But basically there is tourism, there is some education, law and order. Things are changing, things are going on. What is your perspective or thoughts on exactly how life is for minorities or in general life in the Valley these days? Over to you. You're muted.
Thank you for inviting me. Of course, KO is my so-called mother organization in the US. And it's a pleasure to be here. You have guests who are people that I have great respect for. So I'm really very thankful to be in their august company. Yes, I think the situation, if we talk about the Valley right now in real time, it's a broad mosaic of the people that are there. And I'm primarily going to focus on our own people, Kashmiri Pandits, though I can talk about others as well if need be. And the complexity of the situation is such that that it cannot be described in just a few words, but there is a succinct one word or term that I can give, which would say the situation there is grim. But it also depends on the nature of the people that you deal with. Essentially, you have four classes of people there. You have people who actually weathered the worst and stayed put. And their number, you have to understand briefly, as much as the government is said about 62,000 families are registered outside the Valley, meaning about 350,000 people are thereabouts. The number of people who actually stayed in the Valley in past early 90s was actually somewhere around 10%, around 35 to 40,000 people. But because they became so isolated and they've received practically no relief and no particular help, that population then started dwindling down. They left over a period of time. By 1996, when before the state elections were held, the Home Ministry actually did a census of the various districts, and came out with a figure of 18,000 as being the residual Kashmiri Pandits living there. And then, of course, all the major massacres of, Sangrampura, Mandama, Gul, these took place. So that by the time, to give you a marker, by the time of 2014, when the new government of Mr. Modi took over, the number was already down to about 4,000. And then you would think perhaps that might have changed anything, but the fact is they still kept trickling out. And today I would say their number is roughly about 2,500 in that group. This is the group that basically is very hardy. I mean, they have seen it all. They have seen the worst of the worst. So they're not, as much as they are obviously feeling the pressure of the situation and are concerned about their safety and security, but they are not thinking in terms of leaving. They're not thinking in terms, in other words, they have put their stake there. They have gone through the worst in terms of situation. Quite frankly, for their perspective, it's not as bad as it was if you were there in 1992, 93. That was the peak period. So that there and a number of them actually have death threats right now. They have police protection. They are to be cautious. But quite frankly, they are also at the age when they feel like they have nothing to lose. If they have to die, they may as well die in the valley with dignity in their homes. And they look at, of course, all the news from Jammu, elsewhere, where people are struggling for years to get better living conditions. They feel at least their conditions are either equal or better than those people in Jagati and elsewhere. So that's one group. So about 2,500 thereabouts, 500 thereabout families. Though if you add up all the families, and I have actually contributed to a census that was done. There are about 808 families, but those 808 families also include non-Kashmiri Pandit Hindus. Kashmiri Pandit Hindus are about 500 families. Then you have the second group of Kashmiri Pandits who are basically taking the jobs under the Prime Minister's scheme, and their number kind of fluctuates a little bit, but I would say they are somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 now. That number has slowly gone up. It's going to go up to 7,000 eventually, but they are somewhere around between 5,000 and 6,000. Now, this is a very sort of a flexible group because they kind of have feet both in the valley as well as in Jammu. And it's very funny because when I started making rounds to these camps where they are located, the housing that has been provided, in the beginning, they were quite frankly crowded, and they were also didn't have really much of a conveyances, in other words, transportation, other than what they produced. Now, when I went there last time, which was just a year and a half back, just before the COVID hit, I was in the valley, and almost everybody has a vehicle. Everybody has a car.
I see.
So they are all doing well.
I see.
This is the crowd that is basically on government jobs. So they actually do every weekend or whenever there's reason to go, marriages or strikes or whatever, or things get hot, they jump in their car and go. And if you know, I don't know how many people know, but the highway system in a good weather, not in today's weather, but in good weather, you can make from Srinagar to Jammu in 4.5 to 5 hours.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yes, it is that dramatically different today. You can actually make it in 4.5 to 5 hours. So it's not very far for them. And so they are actually in a kind of a sweet spot in that sense. They are coming. They also go to Jammu. They vent their feelings out in Jammu, but when they come to Kashmir, they are very, very much more accommodative to the surroundings. It's a kind of an interesting change to see the same folks in it's almost like, I would say, like Abdullahs and Muftis in reverse, when they would say one thing in Delhi and they say another thing in Srinagar. But that's the nature of the beast in this case. Everybody has to do whatever the surroundings dictate. So that is the second group. The third group is is actually a little bit more intellectual, because this is the group that has actually been hired directly. They are not, they actually have competitively won positions in the government services, like JK Bank and other places, which are not tied to the Prime Minister's package. And this number, their number is somewhere around 700-800 families. And since they have full families with them, the total number will be about 2,000 or thereabouts people. And then finally, there are actually people who are in taking advantage of the business side of the activities, because government of India is spending massive amounts of money in the valley. There's tremendous construction going on. Most of the people, quite frankly, are making money are Muslims, and they're making money because they are there. But some Pandits have now started joining. I was just talking the other day to somebody, and he said, on the 21st of December last year, 2021, government gave for construction of 5 transit camps 166 crores.
Wow.
It was 166 crores was put in the private sector. So for those entrepreneurs, which have, I would say, the American zeal, like they said, go west, young man, go to Kashmir, young man. You want to make money, you have military engineering services, MES,
Wow.
PWD, and last but not the least, you have the department of, which is called the Disaster Management, Relief, Rehabilitation, and Reconstruction, which is the relief department of the thing. Big money being spent.
Amazing.
So people are, I know of Kashmiri Pandits who actually are based in Ladakh because they think that's safer, but then who do work in the valley itself. And of course, there are some who have come, like we heard of this gentleman named Sandeep Mawa, who is on the hit list, and whose driver died because the killer thought he was the driver of the car. I mean, he caters to the tourism industry. He has got a shop with his father and all that in Maharajganj, but actually he caters to a lot bigger crowd where, for example, almost anybody who is driving a scooter in Gulmarg, remember they are showing you the scooters on the snow scooters in Gulmarg, almost all being distributed by Sandeep Mawa.
Wow.
One of the big furniture shops in Kashmir right now, the gentleman by the name of Ashok Bhatt, who came a few years back, and he is running a big. So what I'm saying is that there are certain groups, people are of different kinds. Together, I would say at least 10,000 people, most likely between 11,000 and 12,000 Kashmiri Pandits on a given day in the valley. And this is outside of the tourism, the religious tourism people that come in and come out and going in. Now, as I said, having said all this, the Pandits do feel a sense of, there's a security, there's almost a, Damocles head. I mean, as I said, these are the people, I would say, these are the people who have basically decided that this is life, and you take risks and you are there. And so that's how they are feeling.
Okay. I think maybe we'll just take a change. I think we got enough fodder. I think you'll have a lot of questions. So the understanding or the ground reality information that you provided, I don't think any media covers that. So this is really amazing piece of information and true information. So I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions in the question round. So a lot of folks are asking questions. So please post them in the chat window, and our team will curate them. And towards the end of the program, we will ask individual panelists the questions as as appropriate or as they are directed. I want to thank you, Vijayji. Thanks a lot for providing those details. I'm going to change the gears a little bit now, and we are going to go towards the creative world now, or the movie world, so to speak. Ashokji, a well-known filmmaker and social activist, is currently serving as the president of the Indian Film and Television Directors Association. He's here with us today. And before we talk to Ashokji and I ask my question, which is relevant to his field of expertise, let us take a minute to look at a couple of movie clips that Neetu and team have put together for us. Neetu, can you put those films?
You have killed your husband and thrown his body in the Jhelum River. We have still not found his body.
Indian Parliament remained silent. Intellectuals, secularists, human rights activists remained silent. To save their dignity and their lives, these 350,000 Kashmiri Pandits had to flee their homeland, leaving behind everything they had. They took refuge at the feet of the rest of India, a secular, democratic India. But what kind of a refuge was this? Indians, refugees in their own country? The Pandits thought it would be a temporary phase. Things would get better. The Hindus and the other minorities do not subscribe to the idea of separating from India, nor do they agree to be governed by a state which derives its authority from the law and precedents of Islamic Nizam-e-Mustafa. Kashmiri Pandits have always been at the forefront of the struggle against secessionism, communalism, and fundamentalism. Terrorist violence in the valley is not a freedom struggle at all.
Who has come here to ask us what has happened to my son? He has been killed, leaving behind his wife and child, crying.
There is no justification in a freedom which impinges upon the freedom of innocence. There can be no equality which leads to inequality.
हम लौटेंगे एक दिन, एक दिन एक साथ हम लौटेंगे कश्मीर.
Those heart-wrenching scenes were from the movie Sheen that was made in 2004, and the other one, The World Remained Silent, in 2006. These are a few of the director's dispassionate work on the stark portrayal of the essence of the Kashmiri Pandit genocide and aftermath that earned standing ovations in various international film festivals within India, in London, and in United Nations in Geneva. Welcome again, Ashokji, and good morning. I believe you're joining us from Mumbai. I truly believe you're in the middle of it all and you've seen a lot of media, movies, and how the content business goes. But Sheen, the movie, was made in the early days after the Exodus. Community was still struggling in every way. My question for you is, how was it, the experience of making the film? How difficult was to get this project together and put the show on the road? If you can talk about that a little bit.
Namaskar, Sanjay ji, Archana ji, my friend, my brother Sushil Pandit, Vijay Sawal ji, Aarti Singh Tikku, Meena Tikru ji, Aarti Kaul ji, Sanjay Kaul ji, and Indu Kaul. All of you have been inspirations to the community in some way or the other. Coming to Sheen, you see, I have gone through the entire journey of our exodus since 1990 and before that. Though I have been born and brought up in Mumbai, my touch with my roots have been and had been always there, because credit goes to my parents who, out of a year, I think 6 months, we were in Kashmir. So when I was in Kashmir in 1989, used to go there quite occasionally. I was doing a project for Srinagar Doordarshan. I was making a documentary called Srinagari se Srinagar Tak. And I had gone to Kashmir with that film after I completed the film, the post-production of that film in Mumbai. And I was walking on the streets of Ganpatiyar, where there was an attack. Shabir Shah had attacked and taken over the entire lane, which goes to Nai Sadak. And there was an attack at around 9:30, 10, and I had to enter into Ganpatiyar temple, and I had to stay there for the entire night because my Matamar was in Karfari Mola Habakadal, so I was going towards my house. I saw those days when the terrorism had risen or was started rising up. So entire journey till 1990, 19th January, I have seen the entire phase. Then when I was in Kashmir on 19th of January, before that, when everything happened, in the late nights, when things happened and all that, and when I came out to Mumbai, the exodus had already begun. So I went back to Jammu and I was working there with my friends. When people were coming in the trucks at Gita Bhavan, they were coming down, they were trying to settle it, because Gita Bhavan was one of the main areas where people were initially being settled. Amarnath Vaishnavi was working very hard. There were a lot of people, who got together and saw to it that, because nobody knew, and all the faces, Sanjay, were blank. They didn't know what was happening. So from that image of that person, whether it was old or whether it was middle age, or whether it was a woman, all those images started troubling me. And they started coming down, settling down, refugee camps were being settled. So I have seen everything, and I have faced everything, because I worked in the camps. I was doing my theater workshops in the camps, so that the youngsters don't get violent. And then after the camps, I made a small school myself in Jidi, which was again a refugee camp. So when an entire phase happened, I was, in fact, for 6 months I was in Jammu. I left all my work, I left all my professional work, and I was doing very well. My television shows were super hit, my Filmi Chakkar, my Ajo Zindagi, every show was a big success on television. But I thought to myself, I spoke to myself in front of a mirror, and I said, today, if I don't stand by my community, I don't stand by my country, then I think I'm the most weakest person on this earth, and I have no right to live. So let me forget my house, and then I had a great support in my mother, my wife Mirja, and even my kids for that matter, who said, please, go ahead and stand and do whatever you want to. And then luckily I got a lot of friends around in Jammu, who picked up this entire fight, and they were great inspirations to me. Shazabul Saab is one amongst them. Sushil is another. So I got a lot of support from people. So when I came back after this entire fire being burnt in Jammu, their places, when I came back to Mumbai, I said something has to be done about this, because I'm a filmmaker. Something has to be done about it. So when I was in Jammu, working in the refugee camps, I shot all those portions. I interviewed people. Whatever you saw a bit you must have seen the entire film also. This is live shot. I have handled the camera. I shot these videos. I had a high band camera. I had a cameraman from Doordarshan, and I told myself, today if I don't shoot all this, tomorrow I'll be told by the governments, by the politicians that this never happened. So the record had to be, visual record was very important. And I spent, I must have shot nearly 4-5 hours of material. And then I made this documentary called And the World Remains Silent. And I can tell you that this is the only documentary we have, which is a real image of what happened in 1990s. Then after that, people created, and a lot of our footages that we used and all that. But then I thought to myself as a maker that let me do something fiction. And I got on board because a lot of people in this industry I know. I approached Sara Shi, and I really salute him, Subrat Roy Sara, who said, Ashok, why not? I'm there with you. Why don't you make this film? Because I narrated the entire subject. So I sat with Raman Kumar, who wrote the script. I got on board. I went to Raj Babbar. He said, fine, let us do this film. There's a girl called Sheen. I went to Nadeem Shawan. I went to London. I told him that I want you to do the music of the film, and all the songs were very hit. So the film came on board, and this was the first ever, I want to reiterate, first ever film on Kashmiri Hindus, Kashmiri Pandits, who suffered the worst ever genocide and ethnic cleansing of the community, because I couldn't take it. I, as an individual, as a maker, as a creative person, as a Kashmiri Pandit, I said, how can this happen to me? And why did this happen to me? We being Indians, we being real hardcore, Indians who believe in the Indian national flag, how can this happen to us? So my frustration, my anger, I brought it on the celluloid. I brought it on the screen. And you're right, Sanjay, where you said that it happened. The film became, I think the film was before time, because people were trying to settle themselves and all those kind of things. But I made this film with a lot of honesty, with a lot of imagination, and whatever you see in my film, Sanjay, it hits you because this was my own experience. Nobody has narrated this story to me. Nobody has. I've not done any research. I was a part and parcel of every character. Raj Babbar was me. Sheen was me. All those kind of things. So it basically happened during the time when things were on. When I interviewed a person in I think in Nagarota, that shot is there in my documentary, And the World Remains Silent, and he showed me his tongue, which was cut, and he said my tongue was cut because I was talking about my country. So these images, these visuals will never go out of my life, and this has been transported to my kids, who always talk about it. But Sushil ji said that how can it be transported to the kids? It's basically the generation, our generation, who have to transport things. And fortunately for me, I was very lucky that I have Nilja at my house as my wife, who continuously kept me and others in touch with music. And I think music has the power of
Healing.
keeping. Well, you started this entire event with RTG's song. I think after RTG sang, nobody had to talk. Nobody need to talk anything about it. I think those 3 couplets with RTG sang with so much of simplicity, with so much of honesty. I'm talking about that honesty. All the faces today on the screen, whether it's Aarti Tikku Singh ji or Sushil ji or you or Vijay Sadawal ji or Archana ji, Indu ji, all of us, we are basically, Sanjay, honest people. We know that something great wrong has been done to us, and this feeling of wrong being done to us has to remain alive.
Thank you. Yeah. I think it was really, the movie was really early, and I think second question that I'll ask you in the second round is also related to the content, world, and how we can do some things differently, and your ideas on that. And thank you very much.
Can I say one thing about the film, since it's related to Ashokji's film?
Yes, okay. 1 minute.
Listen, Ashok ji gave me the
Vijayji,
privilege.
Vijayji, let me say that.
All right.
I know I thought I'll say it in the next round. I really thank Vijay Sadavul ji for taking this film to Geneva.
Okay.
And he called me.
Great.
This film was screened in Geneva, so I didn't want Vijay ji to say that. I'm thankful to him with my heart and soul that he
Sure.
went all out, and that's why I respect you a lot, Vijay ji.
Sure.
You
Sure.
are a magician. You are the kind of energies you have, the kind of power you have, the way you have slogged and worked. Since the inception, you have inspired all of us.
Sure. Sure. Okay. Okay. Point covered, right, Vijay
Yeah,
ji?
point
Okay.
covered.
Okay.
It was a pleasure for me and honor too.
So next, we are moving to. I'm just trying to a little bit being a time managing time, because we have second round of questions, and those questions are very relevant to the first question, and I want to cover everything. And Indu and Neetu are sending me a lot of questions are being asked. So I hope and pray that we'll have some questions for all of you towards the end. Aarti ji is a senior Indian journalist and the founder and editor of the New Indian, having worked in various conflict-ridden zones of India. Aarti has written and spoken extensively on the Kashmir conflict, including her 2019 US congressional hearing, where she was vocal about the Pakistan-sponsored Islamic terrorism killing lives in Kashmir. Ironically, in the wake of life threats to her brother in the valley, her Twitter account was recently locked when she voiced the alarm of the terrorist threat. Unfortunately, without Twitter understanding who is the actual victim in the scenario. आरती जी, मैं आपसे जो सवाल पूछना चाहता हूँ वो थोड़ा इंडिया के बारे में है. पहला सवाल.
Sanjay ji, Aarti ji had to drop for a minute and she'll be back in a bit. She's not feeling well, but she'll be back. She'll be back in a bit. Can we go to maybe Meena ji, and then we'll.
Should we do that? Okay. Okay. Yeah. I didn't realize that. Maybe you texted me, but I didn't see it.
No, that's all right. Thanks.
So now what we will do is we will go to Meena Trakru, and I would request Archana ji to introduce her, and after that we will come back to Aarti ji's or Aarti Singh's question. Thank you, Archana, please.
Thank you, Sanjay. And what a wonderful discussion we are having so far. So it's my pleasure to welcome Meena. How are you, Meena? Thank you.
Good, thank you. I'm good.
Thank you for attending the program. So Meena is special in a way that she's related to Shri late Tiklal Taplu, and the family obviously has suffered through the martyrdom of Taplu, Mr. Taplu. So Meena will give her personal accounts of how her family has gone through that journey of pain and reconciling with the fact that a member of their family was just taken away by the terrorists and the militants. So Meena ji lives in New Jersey. She was born in Wazirbagh, Srinagar, and she lived in Tokyo and Hong Kong, I think Bangkok and Singapore for many years, and then has just recently come to New Jersey. She lives in New Jersey with her parents who are close by, Mrs. Sheila and Roshanlal Trakru. Miss Sheila ji is the sister of Shri Tiklal Taplu. So, Meena, most of us are aware how tragic and brutal it was for you and your family when you went through this martyrdom of Mr. Tiklal Taplu, who was killed in cold blood. It must have been so hard and difficult to talk about it even today. Can you please share with the viewers today a bit about how the family coped with that huge sorrow and his trauma and tragedy for the past 3 decades, and how that pain has evolved? And recently, Mr. Taplu's wife, Sarlaji, also passed away. So the sorrow obviously has deepened now. So please tell us a little bit about the family and your journey with that. Thank you.
Sure. So my mom is Tikla, Mama G's sister, and what she's told me is that he's always been, he was part of the RSS, and he's sort of always been sort of the fighter, as he was called, the Sher of Kashmir. He's always fought for the right of Kashmiri Pandits in Srinagar. He was the vice president of the BJP. He was friends, and he went to law school with. I forgot. Anyway, so first I just want to thank you for the invitation or whatever else. I'm really humbled by my presence with all these esteemed guests. Extremely people who've been very well versed in Kashmir and everything else. So I thank you for this opportunity to speak. Obviously he was my Mama Ji, so I've known him for all my life. His wife was like sort of my second mother. So we were very deeply saddened that she passed away December 30th, but it makes us very happy that she's there with him. I was there in Kashmir in the summer of 1989. I was in Srinagar, and that was when basically the black flags and hardals were going on. But him being sort of very bold and boisterous or whatever else, and not scared of anyone or anything, he we would actually walk around, and I would like I was only in my first year in college, and I would look around, and I was always looking for guns or terrorists or whatever else, but he was like, no, don't worry. He would hold my hand, and we would just he lived in Chinkramola and Habakadal, so we would just walk down the streets, and we'd go all the way to the main road where you would see the trucks, the big jeeps and everything else with their black flags and everything else. So it was a fairly scary time, and things got worse. There were many hardals. They were all told to stay inside. We left Kashmir to go to Ahmedabad to visit my mom's other brother. We left at the beginning of August, and I told him, I begged him, please don't stay here. Like he really was telling his family to go. We had all left for we had all left for Delhi together. And I told him, I said, don't stay back. I said, you have to leave. And he's like, no, nothing will happen to me. Don't worry about it. And being in college, you don't realize that livelihood is also very important. He couldn't just leave his job, and he couldn't just leave like that. So, it was very unfortunate because I was in college, and my parents called me back, and I was very close to all my mom's brothers, and I was so upset with God that day. We lived in Flushing, and I went to the Hindu temple, and I was so upset with God. I said, how could you do this? He was one of the nicest people in the world. He tried to help anyone and everyone that he could possibly help. My mother was obviously devastated. His kids, obviously his wife as well, but I know he died, fighting for what he believed in. The story goes that he was feeding a dog, and he was shot and killed. Supposedly he was actually alive when they took him in the ambulance, but someone in the ambulance killed him. So these are the stories that go on. But it was amazing. There were like more than 100,000 people who showed up at his funeral, not wedding, funeral, and Muslims and Hindus, because he was a friend, he was a brother to everyone. It wasn't just he was only pro, Pandits or whatever else. He believed in that. Everyone should live well, everyone should live in peace and everything else. And it was really unfortunate. But as you just brought up, about Twitter and everyone else sort of blocking, information, I think it's really important for us Pandits to really sort of bring the narrative in, as right now we have, Mr. Modi ji who's in power, right? And it's important for us to strike strike when the iron is hot, and I think it's really important for us. Really, for me, I tried to buy the house that my cousins all agreed to sell to the Muslims or whatever else. I told them I'll buy it for you. Being in America, we're very fortunate. We could afford a lot of houses there, but they refused to let me buy it. They said it's a mud house. What are you going to do? It's going to fall. But for me, it was nothing about that. I knew that my mom was devastated with the selling of the house, because it was her house where her mother was, her father was. It was there for more than 100 plus years, right? So it had nothing to do. It was a mud house. It wasn't a lavish house or anything else like that. And it was also for me to sort of say to the people, you can kill us, but you're never going to push us away. Unfortunately, my cousins who do live in India, they didn't have as strong a fortitude as I did about that. So it was quite sad. But just a few things that I want to bring back is that I think it's important for us to work with the Indian government as well as the US government to basically try to get our homes back. I think we need to sort of create a very strong relationship with the US, president and everything else. Whether you like Trump or you like Biden or you like Kamala or whatever else, I think it's very important for us, being a Democrat or a Republican, for us to really create a strong narrative. Pakistan does that very well. They do that with the New York Times. They do that with, with media and advertisements and everything else. And I think India being, us being Hindus and always trying to do the right thing or whatever else, I think it's important for us to push the envelope. I think last year at Princeton University, there was a lot of issues where, Hindus were not being taken seriously, and I think it's very important for us to be a little bit more aggressive. The one thing that I've always had you got to give your hats off to the Muslims, because you know what? They could be Sunnis, they could be Shias, but at the end of the day, they love each other and they will never sit there and speak badly about each other. And I think we need to have that sort of, even in India, you have people in India who are like, oh, this never happened. Oh, we should be part of Pakistan or whatever else, right? And even our own, people in India don't think anything happened in Kashmir. And, we're not able to translate our story to even the Indians in India. And I think it's important for us to really be able to do that as well, so I'm just going through a few of the notes that I wrote, my dad was there in 1987. And, as I think one of the panelists did say, it had already started way before 1990. Like my dad was there meeting a friend of his, and he was talking, politics with his friends and everything else. And his friend who was Muslim, he just started yelling at my dad, saying, what are you, crazy, this, that, the other. And this was my dad's, childhood friend, and my dad couldn't understand. And then then afterwards, something happened or whatever else. Like the guy told him, I'm going to kill you or whatever else. And then afterwards, the guy told my dad, he goes, look, if I hadn't said that, there was someone who was going to sit there and stab you in the back, So I think these things were festering, and these were very latent things that were sort of already there and sort of came to a front in 1989 and, took its peak in 1990. And sadly, no government, not the government in, Jammu and Kashmir or the Indian government really did anything, and has not really done anything for the last 30 years. Okay, I'll stop now.
Thank you, Meena. Thank you for sharing your personal story, with us. I know it's very painful. Even now, we can see that. We can see the emotions in your voice. And of course, I just didn't want to, I wanted to stop you there. But it gives an idea to the people that how closely we have, gone through the brutalities and how it has touched everyone's life so closely. So thank you so much for that narration, and, my best wishes and love to you. I'll talk to you soon. Sanjay ji, please take it from here. I think Aarti ji is probably back now. You're on mute, Sanjay ji, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Hey, Aarti.
Hi, Aarti. Namaskar. How are you?
I have a bad throat, but then I couldn't miss this.
I know. I heard that. So thank you. Thank you very much for joining. It's a pleasure. And it's early in India still, and you're not feeling so well. That's what I was told. So thank you for joining. I did read out your intro a little bit, but I'm going to read it again since you're here. Aarti is a senior Indian journalist and the founder and editor of The New Indian, having worked in various conflict-ridden zones of India. Aarti has written and spoken extensively on the Kashmir conflict, including her 2019 US congressional hearing, where she was vocal about the Pakistan-sponsored Islamic terrorism killing lives in Kashmir. Ironically, in the wake of live threats to her brother in the valley, her Twitter account was recently locked when she voiced an alarm of the terrorist threat. Unfortunately, without Twitter actually understanding the victim in the scenario. मेरा सवाल जो होगा आरती तुमसे आपसे ये होगा इंडिया के students और generally जो life है वहाँ के बारे में. So I'll try to keep it short. Many Indian students or Indian Americans also have no historical perspective on what happened in our lifetimes to Kashmiri Hindus and Pandits and Sikhs. Most people who left the valley never went back, and that is a fact. So the question is, how do you keep this conversation and discussion relevant in India in the mainstream? I think Sushilji did allude to this a little bit, but from your perspective as an active journalist, should this be a part of learning in schools or high school or college? Any thoughts on that?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to speak here today. And it is an honor to be in the same panel as Sushilji and Ashokji and others. Well, I think one has to give credit to Sushilji, Ashokji, and Dr. Agnishekhar, Dr. Ajit Rangu, and many others who founded Panun Kashmir, who founded Roots in Kashmir, and who have been really carrying the torchlight of Kashmiri Pandit cause for the last 30 years or so. And if they were not there, had they not done what they did in the last 30 years, I think the kind of awakening, the kind of awareness that has happened in India, please underline the word happened. I'm saying that India is not what some of you think or imagine what it was, say, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It has come a long way. Today, I think people and students, youth especially in colleges or universities across India are far more aware than they were before. Second point about Kashmiri Pandits. I think in small towns, in villages, you will find more awareness about the Kashmiri Pandit cause than probably the metropolitan cities of India. And there is a reason to that, because the intellectual class, because the Indian elite class took a very political and partisan stance on the Kashmiri Pandit exodus and genocide. The very idea, the distortion of history, it percolated in metropolitan colleges and universities and schools even. However, our villages and our small towns were insulated from that kind of indoctrination because the elite as it is, whether it's in India or elsewhere, they do not care about common people. And they think that they can drive the narrative, which they did for 30 years or so. But this narrative has been broken by the stalwarts of Kashmiri Pandit community, and I'm grateful to them because I think I somewhere myself was a victim of that indoctrination. I worked in English media, mainstream media, I've been working with the English mainstream media of India for over 20 years now. And I know for sure, I am a witness to that history, that the Kashmiri Pandit voice actually did not matter. It did not really resonate with the intellectual class in India. Now, the second good thing that happened in the last 10, 15 years was the advent of social media and technology-driven media, which created an alternative platform, which created alternative space for truth. Facebook and all these social media giants, which have become way bigger than they were to begin with. And that always brings hubris, I think, and that always brings, you become part and parcel and partisan, because then you get close to corporations, you get close to the state, you get close to superpowers, you get close to military industrial complex and various other complexes. And now technology itself, technology-driven media, which is Twitter, Facebook, etc., they are themselves a part of technology industrial complex. So a lot of you can say course correction that happened because of social media, is also now vulnerable to distortions.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, I would say I would give credit to Twitter and Facebook in a huge way for bringing out the real truth, because I started in 2000. This was soon after I graduated from Columbia University in New York. I was very active and vocal on Facebook, and I created spaces for an alternative dialogue. I created space for my truth, your truth, the community's truth. And we were out there talking to people, Kashmiri Muslims, the rest of the country, and people even living in the US and elsewhere. And that did help to counter the false narrative which was created by Pakistan, which was created by Kashmiri separatists, which was created also with the help of this military industrial complex based in the US. So honestly, I think the situation is not as bad as you would think. I think our overall, I would say youth are more aware today. In metropolitan cities, in cosmopolitan cities of India, it is a challenge, but I think it is, once again, it's a phase in history where elite youth, or you can say youth who have come from elite class, they are disoriented, they do not know facts, they do not know the truth, but slowly, gradually, and steadily, they will come to realize that the Indian state, the intellectual class, the elite class, hid truth from them.
Thank you. Thank you. And I really kind of identify with the answer about indoctrination and the English media, school or education. I think most of us definitely were affected by it. So I think that part is very true. Thank you again. We are now going to go to the second round. Archana ji, how are we doing on time? We are okay,
Sanjay
right?
Ji, can I butt in for a minute?
Please.
Sanjay ji, now that Aarti is there, saying, she has made the entire community proud, not only a community, but the entire country, by winning a huge battle against Twitter. So Twitter is not a small organization or small, association where she had to fight. This victory of Aarti is not a victory of Aarti herself only. It's a victory of entire community. It's a victory of country. So one journalist, one member of our community, if she can win a battle against an organization which controls rules, makes governments, false governments, such a powerful organization, I think the entire community should applaud Aarti's efforts and win this battle against Twitter.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that. I did not know that. Okay, that was really, thank you.
May I have just one comment, Sanjay ji, please?
Sure,
I
please
want to
go ahead.
congratulate Aarti on that. Very proud of you. Good job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Keep
Thank
it
you.
up.
Honored. Blessed.
You are a tigress. Keep it up.
Blessed.
Ashok ji, next question is for you. And like I was telling you earlier, ये सवाल पहले सवाल से जुड़ा है. Basically, for you and other folks in the media and the film world, movies come and go. And, they are a big hit and they stay for some time. We had Sheen, and now Kashmir Files is coming out. A big thanks to Kashmir Files team to make a wonderful movie and rekindling the discussion in the mainstream. And it is a lot of interviews, and I've not seen the movie, and it's very realistic, and people have said great things about it. But I really feel the history of Kashmir and Kashmiri Pandits is very rich and long. So I'm sure there is no lack of content or material. Is there room for something like a TV program with seasons and episodes that will bring some continuity to the whole thing? Because it would just sort of go on for seasons. And I think it has a different impact on the people. Can you speak to that?
You see, Sanjay ji, Aarti raised a very pertinent point where she spoke about social media. Days have changed now, times have changed, and I think every individual with his mobile in his hand is a narrator, is a filmmaker, is a person who can bring in difference to the society. You don't need theaters to bring in a change in the society anymore. There are OTT platforms now, and every individual who has a mobile phone, and if everybody has a mobile phone, is an OTT platform by itself. So you see, what I actually wanted to raise a point is that where we Kashmiri Pandits, organizations, associations lack, I'm not trying to criticize, don't misunderstand me, is that the power of social media has to be understood by our organizations, Kashmiri Pandits individually also. Now, you don't need any support from anybody for that matter. You just have a mobile phone in your hand, and you narrate your stories. You narrate your whatever you want to say. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook are powers by itself. You go to Kashmir, you go anywhere, you narrate a story. You see, there are influencers now on social media. These influencers are so powerful. They are so powerful that you can't even imagine, Sanjay. So our community, our people, our associations, our organizations, apart from having these Zoom calls and webinars, have to get into the nitty-gritties of social media, which is a mafia by itself.
Yeah.
You have to understand the importance of it. There has to be now, for instance, 19 January. I will appeal to my committee members and everyone that there should be one single hashtag for whatever you write on the genocide and exodus of Kashmiri Hindus on 19th of January, whatever happened. So that one hashtag will start trending. Now, if everybody has different hashtags, we will not trend. So 19th January, let us see, through KOA and through other organizations, let us decide on one hashtag, and within 1 hour's time, 19th January, Exodus Day, Genocide of Kashmiri Pandits should start trending the entire day. So if that trending is, there cannot be, any film cannot be more impactful than trending on Twitter for that particular day. That's what I'm trying to say. So it's very important. Let me reiterate, Sanjayji, that let us get into the science of social media. Social media is science. Social media creates impact. Social media, tomorrow I don't have to write a letter to my Prime Minister. I just have to write a letter and tag it to him. So things have become so easy. Communication has become so easy. So it's very important for us. There are so many influencers in Kashmiri Pandits. Look at Sushil. Look at RTG. Look at so many people who are so good on Instagram, but they are individuals. Collectively, we have to take this science of social media to a different level altogether and create an impact.
Great point. Yeah, I think definitely. I think Archanaji, we should talk about this. I think later. This is a huge thing. I understand the big.
Sanjayji, let me tell you, you cannot deny the fact that the impact of social media, the impact of digital media, has been understood by our Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who fought the battle of 2014, not only on social media, but he created an impact and won the elections. Yeah. Social media played a very important role. Very true. Let us get into the impact of social media and win our battles and wars.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, I guess, yeah.
Sanjay, same thing with President Obama.
Yeah.
He transformed the way elections are fought in this country, and he knew how to use social media very effectively.
Yeah, sometimes for the good things people use it.
Sanjayji, what I also want to say, Archanaji, that this should be a constant effort, not only on 19th January or 26th January or these days. Right. So let us not remember ourselves or our tragedies only on those particular days, because you forget the entire day. We have our Nirmatas the entire year. We enjoy ourselves. And then 18th of January, we start thinking, nahi, 19th January ko program karte hain. So it should not be a happening.
Ashokji, trust me, you're going to get a call from me.
I would just, I
Yes,
do respect the opinion of, that we should really have a social media platform, but I think it's also important. What is it that we want to get at the end of the day? Look, I mean, I don't think people want to hear about, January 19th being a martyr day for Kashmiris or whatever else. It's a very small population of people who want that. But I think we need to make a more concerted effort I think we need to have a little bit more of a plan of action. Everyone talks about the fact that they would like to go back to Kashmir, right? And I think that should be more of something that we should look forward to, right? Not talking about the exodus all the time, because, I think there's fatigue on that as well, but I think, using social media to really, at the end of the day, social influencers can do a lot. But the fact is, you do have to talk to, Mr. Modi, you do have to talk to senior leaders around the world, because that is really where you're going to make the impact. And that's where you're going to make the change. And that's where you're going to try to basically figure out, do people want to go back to Kashmir? People talk about going back to Kashmir. People want to go back to Kashmir. This generation wants to go back to Kashmir. Will the next generation want that? I'm not sure. But I think we have to sort of look forward and say, what is it that we really want to get to in the next 50 years, right? And I think that's very important.
We have something on that. I think, Amina, there is a question regarding that towards the end in the wrap-up round about the action. And, all these events are great and social media is also important, but what do we want? So we'll come to that. Thank you very much for bringing that up. Aarti, the next question, Aarti, next question is for you. And this is again related to the first thing we talked about. And I think you did provide some perspective, the media and the technology and how the world has changed and how it is much better than, some of us think. I want to talk about a little bit US universities and the young generation here in this country. Even like within the Kashmiri community, the feeling is our own young children feel sometimes we are very, I don't want to use the word right-wing, extreme. Since, we give them very liberal education and very, balanced upbringing and so on and so forth. And also the loudest voice in social media always gets noticed. And the loudest voice in the United States, we all know where that comes from, right? So how do we sort of change this lopsided perspective in the US universities and some of the best ones, some of the most prestigious ones? If I talk to Indian students or Kashmiri students, their perspective is not what I want them to think. And you know very well what I'm referring to, right? So can we do something about it? Or it's a very complex problem to solve? Your thoughts?
Well, I would say that of course, it's a very complex problem, and there's only very little that you as a community can do. But I think there is one particular thing that you can do, which is essentially to educate your own children. And I know that they are probably the first generation and some maybe even second generation immigrants in the US. But honestly, these labels, extreme, liberal, left, right, woke, non-woke, these labels do not need to be contested. What needs to be contested is an idea. What needs to be contested is an argument. And that culture you have to inculcate in your own homes. You have to sit on the dining tables and talk to your children and debate arguments. There is no need to even get into the definitions because the left and the right overlap on many issues today. In fact, the right is left today and the left is right today. And that happened because the way states have functioned, the way superpowers have functioned in the last 70 years, you can say since World War II, everything has turned lopsided, everything has turned upside down. So what you really need to do is you need to first, you don't need to contest your children's definitions about you, with, they may call you extreme, but then you have to bring them to the conversation. And I think empathy is a very important factor. And I keep saying this at every place. If Hindus or Indians by overall, if they inculcate values of compassion and values of empathy, values of kindness, goodness in among their children, they should not expect that once they grow, once they are independent individuals in colleges and universities, that they will become something else. They will not. They will follow it on which they were raised to begin with, and that is in the same way. And you have to tell them, you have to educate them. But I think the younger couples who are who are in the process of making a family, I think they will have to inculcate one more element in the among their children. They will have to add one more element in the upbringing of children. And I think that factor is that apart from compassion and kindness and goodness, they also have to inculcate an element of courage. What is missing among, I would say, I may sound a bit harsh, but I think overall Indian families forget to inculcate the element of courage, because as parents become, as couples become parents, they become protective of their children. They want to shield them, insulate from the crudeness and the ugliness of world. And they forget to, one, tell them the truth, which happened in our case when we got displaced in 1990. Most of our parents did not tell us the truth. It was as if there was a blanket ban on speaking about the experience of 1990. We did not know. We were not told. And it was as if there was a tacit consensus within the community that insulate your children from that experience, insulate your children, from that trauma. And I think that has harmed us in many ways. It has made us weak in many ways, because children grow up in that protective atmosphere. They do not encounter the idea called courage. And as they grow up, they do not even agree in the end with their parents, because they have not experienced courage. So courage is the most important factor. Second, speaking truth, even if it's ugly, even if it's harsh, you have to be truthful to your children. And third, I think, is engage them in a debate and have that kind of atmosphere within families where you can converse candidly, where you can question your own ideas and prejudices and biases, and you can question theirs as well. I think if the first generation, second generation NRIs within the community in the US follow just these three things, I think a lot will change. A lot will really, I would say, transform in the US.
True. And I think I really agree. The conversation part.
दोनों साथ में समझ लो, साथ में तुम्हारा 15 तारीख से शुरू हो गया, ठीक है ना? 11 बजे आता है वो, तो तुम.
I think there is some audio we are hearing. The conversation part and the courage part and the truthfulness. I think all the 3 points are really true, and I 100% agree with them. Thank you, Aarti. Next question is for Vijay ji, and I think that kind of relates to what Meena ji was saying. And I think Vijay ji is in a good sort of space or position to talk about it. How to move forward? We all know the problems. We all talked about issues and where we are and why we are. What are some of the next steps for the community in terms of engaging the political corridors? And Vijay ji has been involved in that activity for the longest time. Local congressmen or representatives, township councils. What can we do? I mean, as a community, or not just the Kashmiri Pandits, I think it has to be larger Indian diaspora. I think then there will be some benefit or some impact, and what we can hope to achieve by engaging the local government. Your audio, you're on mute, Vijay.
Thank you. I mean, this question, if you would have asked me this question 5 years back, 10 years or 15, I mean, would have different answers. In other words, the dynamic changes as the situation changes. At the beginning, when we came, quite frankly, nobody even understood when we went to the Congress that there are actually non-Muslims living in the valley. I mean, they thought it was basically Muslims fighting for their rights against the oppressor force. So they didn't even understand our issues for a long time. But the point at that time was that we were getting a lot of calls. KOA was getting a lot of calls from our people, displaced people in Jammu and elsewhere, saying that there's no mention of Kashmiri Pandit genocide in India in newspapers. Please carry that message to the world. You are in the capital of the most powerful nation, and do something. And so that's how we started the Indo-American Kashmir Forum as an offshoot from advocacy group from KOA. And then basically found out that it's not that easy. We could not make a case because Indian government wasn't supporting our case. The government was basically trying to hide that Pandits had fled, because they were, as they announced later through different conversations, officials announced that they basically were thinking that it would create a explosion in India between the communal relationship between Hindus and Muslims in India. So they basically hid our case. So our challenges that time were different. We had to basically make our case known, who we are, where we come from, whatever exactly is our situation. So that advocacy was in a sense simple, but made complex by the fact that not ordinarily people here would think that that Indian government would be appreciative of that point of view, and they weren't. I mean, Indian government's sole concern was to show that Kashmir would be very peaceful had it not been only for the Pakistanis having come in. And here are we saying, yeah, they are one of the elements, but that's not the only thing. It's a much more complex thing, and the local organic element is a very strong component of it, which Indian government absolutely didn't want to mention, dissociate with. In fact, they declared me for a period of time persona non grata at the embassy because I had used the word Islamic terrorism, which ambassador didn't like. But anyway, so that was then. Over the years, it changed. I mean, we reached to the point, quite honestly, when we thought in 2014, all right, now we don't have to really do much because the government, BJP government has come in place, so that's going to make a big difference. Then we saw Article 370 go away, and then we said, well, if they could do something significant like that, they certainly could be doing, thinking about Kashmiri Pandits also in a very, path-breaking manner, finding ways to do. But at the end of the day, quite honestly, if you look at the attitudes of the both governments, in Manmohan Singh's government and this government, present government, there's really not much of a difference. Both of them more or less are on the same wavelength. We don't have time to talk about the details, but I can tell you they basically have the same attitude towards these matters. They are not any, there is no reason for us to expect really something substantial has happened just because 370 was removed and things like that. It has happened. It has helped the national security for certain. Indian national security matters. It has definitely done that. I think there are also issues with law and order and things like that in the valley which have improved. But Kashmiri Pandits need some specific things. So we are in a quandary in the sense, if you talk to an average Kashmiri Pandit in India, they're very pro-Modi. You really cannot, as much as you can criticize the Indian government, you really can't criticize Mr. Modi. And so it is very difficult within our own community to actually get a strong support in understanding what the dynamics is. And this, we have been sort of political retards all our lives. That's why we are in the situation that we are. We don't have the leadership, the quality of leadership, and so on and so forth. So in that context, what do we do in the United States? How do we create an image, especially as already the speakers have said, the social media platforms of our opponents, they get a lot of money. They're state managed and state funded, and here we are basically seeking within so-called Hindu India, the Hindus of northern part of India are seeking help, which or a country which is perceived as to be a national Hindu India run by a nationalist Hindu party. So very difficult sell. So you have to kind of work in a different manner. The messages that we feel, if people are listening and want to do something, messages I think are really, there are three messages that you can give. This is in the US. I can also talk about India later. US, the messages are, you talk about Aboriginal people, because you got it's much harder for you to sell the Kashmir issue from a Pandit perspective to the Democratic Party, because Democratic Party has already decided, and I got it from firsthand from Senator Sherrod Brown, who I know from Congressman, who did immense helped us when he was in the Congress as a congressman, but now a senator. Even then, I mean, he and Frank Pallone and others, they were like solid rock. I mean, Muslims who always wonder, how did they get these people who are without really doing a lot of money or anything like that? But today they're all hesitant because Democratic Party has one of its aims that it is that the Muslim community of this country is a very strong target for them in terms of their support. So they're not going to easily identify with your problem. So given that background, how do we proceed? And so first one is address ourselves as the Aboriginal people of Kashmir. There's a certain weakness where when you talk to the listener, when you talk about, we are the Aborigines of the Kashmir, we are the people who were there and so that would be one message. The second message is that if you don't worry about what's going on in Kashmir, it's going to turn into another Taliban. You will have eventually, you already have northwestern frontier of Pakistan, which is pretty much sort of a forsaken land, and you probably are basically going to get the whole area into Taliban, and the consequences for America are there from 9/11, and they will grow. So that would be the second message in that area. And the third one, quite honestly, is because of the obsession about Chinese. You can introduce a Chinese angle. The Chinese are actually, gnawing at our territory, and they eventually may very well take over the whole of Ladakh. And that will be a very different play in terms of the great power strategic location in Kashmir. So you really, at the end, quite honestly, the message is not directly as much obvious as a Kashmiri Pandit, but it's kind of a subliminal which goes into that area when you kind of mix all these things depending on who you are talking to and how you are doing it. That would be on this side. I think in India it's a bigger challenge because, quite honestly, I went through this process yesterday. One thing very interesting about the Modi government is they are very constitutionally very sensitive to the fact that everything they do is per constitution, and we know now how they did the removal of Article 370. There was a timeline drawn. It was a plan that was built by Arun Jaitley. They followed constitutional methods of eventually reaching to the point where they could use Article 356 and were able to take the decisions of the state assembly in the parliamentary system. Very, very constitutionally strong. Even though the case is in front of the Supreme Court, there's no doubt in even the people who are normally not pro Modi will tell you that it's pretty much a done deal. That Supreme Court is not going to challenge it. Similarly, other day in December, towards the end of December last year, they took a number of constitutional steps within the state, which involved modifying certain laws which were on the books of the J&K from 1970. It was a tiered problem of multiple laws that had been put in place, and they did them in sequence. And the objective was, at the end, was what? That they wanted to get acquisition of land in the Baramulla district and in Gandarbal district for the purposes of national security to be assigned to the military. So they actually procured over almost 1,500 canals of land through constitutional means. So obviously they have if they want to do it, they can do it. They can define land within the constitutional realm of how they did it for the military. So what I'm saying is there is a general reluctance. There's a reluctance. Essentially, BJP got a big briefing from the Home Minister just after he came became the home minister and came to Kashmir. And these are all complex issues, but at the end of the day, quite frankly, at this time, I don't see, quite honestly, any change in the method that the BJP is operating, which is that decisions in Kashmir will be taken on the basis of national security, on the basis of law and order, improving law and order, security, and creating a climate where people are given a chance to come and invest and be able to bring in people who are non-Kashmiris in there and be able to, sort of modify the situation. But I don't see, quite honestly, in their priority that, I got to lose sleep because Kashmiri Pandits are, having a tough time in Jammu and elsewhere. So it's a much more bigger challenge, quite honestly, in India, how to go around. And on top of it, as I said, you can't criticize Mr. Modi much because the Kashmiri Pandit, for better or worse, thinks he's the greatest thing, as we say in America, greatest thing since sliced bread. So it's a very, they cannot think either strategically enough to understand how to deal with that situation, except to think he is a good man and he will eventually take care of us. So let's pray to Sharika ji that so shall happen.
So shall happen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vijay. I know it's a multi-pronged approach, and the election and the demographics and all that stuff plays into it. So, yeah, it is definitely a big discussion, maybe a separate topic in itself. I'm coming back to Sushilji now, and I think the first question I'd asked him about the heritage. This one is a little bit more specific. So, Sushilji, the question for you is, a lot of us feel, and I think this really will be of interest to a lot of us who are here or not in Kashmir or in, globally placed Kashmiris, Hindus and Sikhs and, other folks. There's hardly any activity or funding in Kashmir in terms of its original culture, whether it is literature or music, thought leadership. And I think you talk about these issues a lot. I read a lot what you say and listen to your YouTube videos. But going forward, can we do something? I mean, some ideas that come to my mind, which may be very basic, rewriting some stuff, walking tours, creating a physical structure or a museum or some kind of a library or a site where, could be in Mumbai or Delhi. It cannot be in the United States because most of the Kashmiri Hindus are, I think, in India. So something in India which commemorates having in Kashmir will be a great thing, but I don't know how difficult or how easy that is going to be. Do you think there is a room for that? Can you speak to that?
Yes, indeed. When I was in DC, I visited the Holocaust Museum, and I felt that if anyone in India needed such a collection and such a compendium of facts, it was us who have been wiped clean from the valley. We can do this, and we must do this, and we must put together. Today, technology enables us to put together anecdotal history. Each one of us today is a walking book. We have, from our spaces that we lived in and our experiences, a great contemporary story to tell, which must become part of Kashmir's history, which indeed was absent from the discourse or even knowledge till 10 or 15 years back, because what dominated the discourse was the perpetrators masquerading as victims. What got my goat was Yasin Malik and Gilani being offered civil society platforms in the conclaves of different media organizations, lecturing us as to how we should deal with Kashmir and why India was an occupying force there, and the kind of atrocities Kashmiris were living under since 1990. Our exodus was never part of even a footnote in those conversations or compilations. Our challenge is not so much a museum, unless we are resigned to our fate as some kind of an exhibit in some room or on some wall. Our challenge today is to get this country to acknowledge what it is fighting shy of, which is a Hindu genocide in Kashmir Valley, and not just Kashmir Valley, an ongoing Hindu genocide for several centuries in different parts of the country. And today, fortunately, people have begun to liken their situation in different parts of the country as another Kashmir. You know, that is where we have succeeded. That Kashmir has become the emblem of continuing Hindu genocide.
True.
Whether it is in Bengal, whether it is in Kerala, whether it is in Assam, whether it is in parts of Bihar, UP, or even in the proximity of national capital, when people erupt in fear, in terror, and when they are about to pack their bags, what they say is that we are facing a Kashmir-like situation. This is where we have succeeded to become part of the popular Hindu discourse in this country. But we've not been able to get our governments to acknowledge this. That is the challenge. More than a museum, more than a book, more than an event here or there, I think all of us must resolutely strain in that direction. Yes, Kashmiri Pandits count for nothing. Whether all 100% of us support Modi or all 100% of us rail Modi, we count for nothing. So it doesn't matter to Modi whether all of us support him or all of us are against him, because numerically, it doesn't matter. What do? Just sit on our haunches and say we don't matter? Or do we have a way out? And I think we do have a way out, because our tragedy is only a symptom of what is the larger malaise in India. And I come back to the fact that Hindus are being hounded, just as we were hounded in Kashmir. So it is not Kashmiri Pandit that we must talk about. Our canvas has to be much larger. We have to plug into the larger Hindu challenge in this country. And unless we do that, unless we find force multipliers from other regions, and unless our case becomes a litmus test for this government, a test case for this government, for a larger Hindu issue, we stand no chance. Our problem has been that we have ghettoized our issue into a Kashmiri Pandit issue. Our successive leaders, our successive organizations, and our successive discourse has been Kashmiri Pandit, Kashmiri Pandit, Kashmiri Pandit. And we realize that we count for nothing. And we expect the government to come out with a policy specifically on Kashmiri Pandits when Kashmiri Pandits count for nothing. So the point is, we have to enlarge our canvas. We have to connect, plug into a larger, bigger issue of an ongoing Hindu hate, Hindu attrition, Hindu genocide, which is continuing even in the proximity of national capital, places like Sambhal, places like Rampur, places like Kairana, even within the national capital of Delhi, places like Sundarnagri, places like Srinivasapuri, places like Okhla, Jamia Nagar, which have been completely cleansed of Hindu presence systematically over the years. And unless we plug into that cause, we have succeeded in terms of social discourse, as I just mentioned. And government is reluctant, but we need to force the government. We almost succeeded in 2019 February, when Rajiv Gauba, the then Home Secretary, held a press conference announcing the ban on JKLF. Imagine, JKLF wasn't banned till 2019 February. Can you imagine, in this country? So announcing the ban, he almost as if giving some kind of an alibi, said JKLF was responsible for the Kashmiri Hindu genocide in Kashmir Valley. It was a grudging, reluctant admission by a Home Secretary, and that's it. But the point is, Government of India put itself on a piece of paper and on record. We need this to hear from the topmost voice in this government, and repeatedly. We need this to become the policy and the understanding of the Government of India or any government of the day, to understand Kashmir in a perspective. It has to become part of the larger national understanding as to what happened to us. We are not looking for rehabilitation. We are not looking for museum spaces. We are not looking for jobs or grants of land or some kind of land acquisition for a colony in Kashmir. Sorry. First and foremost, we are looking for an acknowledgement of what happened to us. And unless you acknowledge it, unless you admit to it, you will be treating us like some kind of earthquake victims or a flood victim community, which needs to be rehabilitated in the place of their origin, which is not the case. We would be going back as lambs to slaughter, just as the Prime Minister's package employees, even if they are driving cars, I'm sorry, have to run away at the first available opportunity when they smell trouble. That is the kind of fear they live in. They have to think 10 times before they move their families there. And every time they step out of their, those camps, barbed wire confinements to go to their jobs, they have a prayer on their lips and fear that dominates them. Is that the kind of life we want in Kashmir when we are back? Certainly not. And we can't have a government reluctant to admit, because it strains Hindu-Muslim relationships in the rest of the country, because it puts in jeopardy the concept of secularism, because it is unpalatable, and that is what I was told, to Kashmiri Muslims in Kashmir, because when we all speak about what happened to us, they feel as if they are being put in a dock. So we must stop even talking about what happened to us. Are we willing to compromise on these issues? Are we willing to lie about what drove us out of Kashmir? So first and foremost, we need an acknowledgement from this mighty, huge nation that what is happened to us is nothing short of a genocide. Number two, what I don't hear often enough, and sometimes completely missing in today's discourse also, is justice. Sarla Bhatt cannot come alive and seek justice for herself, nor can Girija Tikku or Tikalal Taplu or Mr. Bhatt of Anantnag, who got shot in the sight of Aarti Tikku when she just walked past, or for that matter, Sarvanand Pol Premi. So all of them, if there is need for a justice, then it ought to be delivered. Their killers are roaming free, raising families, going back to Pakistan, getting married, coming back and living a good life right in our faces. Why isn't justice delivered to the victims and survivors of our community? And why can't we ask for it strongly enough? And when we, wring our hands in sheer frustration as to why our kids don't listen to us, why isn't government listening to us? The point is, when we trade in opinions and points of view, obviously there will be resistance. We need to put the bare facts. We need to put the truth up there, and let us see how they argue with facts, how they argue with the truth. The point is, the truth needs to be put there in all its naked, bare enormity. And that is when we hammer it repeatedly, because governments of the day are reluctant always. With the admission of the truth will entail action on their part. Admitting to genocide is not going to be a mere admission. Then they'll have to do something about it. Would you know that Indian government, despite being a signatory to the Genocide Convention of United Nations, is yet to create a law which punishes genocide. It has an obligation to have in its criminal procedure code and its penal code punishments, and also a special provision for a different kind of prosecution for crime of genocide, which we haven't done. Have we held our governments accountable to that? Have we held our parliament accountable to that? No, because we haven't even voiced this demand vociferously enough. We are still looking for relief. We are still looking for packages. Of course we must, but not at the cost of, there is no trade-off. There is no conflict between seeking justice and seeking relief. It can happen simultaneously. So we need to have an action plan as a community, and our leadership must talk in one voice. We cannot have a bunch of people going to Home Minister, clicking pictures with them and taking it lying down when he says, why, what do you need genocide acknowledgement for? Will you put it on your forehead when you go back to Kashmir? What will it do for you? And you click pictures, come back and share those pictures with the rest of the community that we've almost scaled the Everest summit as if. You know, that is something we need to be very clear about. We cannot trade on these issues. There is absolutely no trade-off in terms of acknowledgement of genocide, in terms of seeking justice for the victims and survivors. And of course, please create a law which reverses all the distress sales that have happened in the last 3 decades. We heard the very first thing in this program was a house being sold in distress and the longing for that house. There has to be a law. You cannot let the beneficiaries of our genocide gloat over those profits that they made through our exodus. Because if that remains as it is, there will always be an incentive for another genocide if we return, if ever we return. Because then there will be another profit to be made by killing us and driving us out. You cannot allow the ill-gotten gains of our exodus, of our expulsion, be retained with these beneficiaries of our genocide. So we have to be very, very clear in terms of what we ask for and be resolute about it. The governments can fight shy because of their own compulsions, because governments have to survive their full term, and they have also a responsibility for what they call order, what they call normalcy, and selling us this semblance of an order, this illusion of a security is what I am absolutely getting tired of. You know, on 5th of August and then 15th of August in Kashmir, they decided to have a tricolor flutter over every shikara. It was a very nice sight, I must admit. And then a month later on Janmashtami, they decided to have a procession of, tableaus and singing and dancing people from Lal Chowk. Again, a very pleasing sight. But it took only 6 to 7 murders in 6 to 7 days immediately after for all that illusion to come crashing down. Because Kashmir is not going to be solved through event management and headline management. And we need to say this. We need to say this loud enough that please do not fool us. We may have a lot of wool in our heads, but don't pull it over our eyes every now and then.
So you were saying something. Can I interrupt you, Sushilji?
Please.
Yeah. So I think you have answered a lot of I'm seeing a lot of questions in the text chat window, and you have covered a lot of those points already about genocide and all that. So really, really thank you and I think I could go on and on, but I think we have to look at the clock and the time also. It is early for you, but I think really I enjoyed listening to you as always.
Sanjay, can I make one comment? It's a very interesting day. Monday is a very interesting day. I'll just be very brief. Monday is a very interesting day because that is the day when Supreme Court has asked the central government to give them their understanding on whether or not they will declare the 6 states where Hindus are a minority. Will they grant minority status to Hindus in the 6 states where Hindus are in a minority. Monday is the deadline for that. So it'll be interesting to see what, if anything, the central government will comment on that.
The wrap-up question now. I think maybe Sushilji, I was going to start with you, but since the last question took more time, then maybe somebody else can start, either Ashokji or Vijayji or Aarti. So the question is, and I think you have captured a lot of that question that I had. So I'm looking at one or 1.5 minute maximum, if we can do it. Basically, the Exodus happened 3 decades back, and we all know changes take time. What was done in the last 75 years will not be undone in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. So we need some takeaway for that. And I think Sushilji has talked a lot about such. For other panelists, and anybody can go, what is the short-term and long-term vision in terms of social and cultural and political and economics of Kashmir, with or without Kashmiri, I would like to say with Kashmiri Pandits or Hindus living there, in next 2 years? Maybe nothing will change in next 2 years. 5 years, let's say next 20 years. And what should happen? What is, I think Sushilji has expressed himself, so maybe we can come to you in the end. If others can express their thoughts, what do they expect? 20 years from now, that is a finite time for things to change in Kashmir, if at all.
Sanjay ji, sorry, do you mind if I just make a quick comment on the conversation that we were just having? You know, I really appreciate Mr. Saswal's and Sushil Pandit's, thing. But I think it's also important to know is that Indians in India are embarrassed for the fact that we are Hindus. We're not allowed to call ourselves Hindu in the state of India, right? And I think that is a big hurdle, no matter which government, whether you have a BJP, Congress, or whatever you have. And I think that is, as much as I would love all the stuff that would, as Mr. Pandit has said, I think the government is never going to acknowledge it because there's too much to appease for voting and everything else, right? But I think the first thing that we need to, as a nation, do is that we need to basically be able to say that we are a nation of everyone together, Hindus, Muslims, whatever it is, right? And we can't keep segregating ourselves, right? But we can't also embarrass the Hindus who are living in India. That's what the Indian government or any of the parties seem to want to do. And that's where it creates a lot of issues. And we can't even, whether it's in Ladakh, it's in Bengal, it's in Kashmir, we can't even get to that resolution because of that issue. So.
Okay. I think we need not discuss or belabor that point. I think everybody can talk a lot. So can we just go back to the question, and maybe Vijayji or Ashokji, you want to take first the next 10, 15, 20 years?
Sanjayji, I want to take a few things ahead of what Sushilji said, and truth cannot be denied. What Sushil said, and I know a lot of people feel uncomfortable when truth is spoken. Meenaji just said that we feel ashamed of calling ourselves Hindus in India. Well, I would like to tell her that things have changed now.
Yes.
There is a total change in the in the entire attitude of this community, this so-called majority community in this country. I'll give you examples. From my industry, any web series or any film or any statement made by any of these sections of cinema or entertainment industry, if it is anti-Hindu, those things flop because of the social media. The hashtag starts boycott so and so thing. I'll give an example of Tandav. Tandav was a web series which was anti-national, which was a lot of things that against Hinduism and all those kind of things. Show was they were taken to court. There was a huge hue and cry, and the entire policies of OTT platforms have changed. That we don't want anything against the majority community. So things have changed, and it will change more and more. Now, coming to the point, what Sushilji was saying, that what is the immediate step we should take? There are a lot of things which will happen automatically also, people also. My concentration or my my entire concentration and my entire view of this entire issue is that we have Jakti camp in Jammu, in Nagrota. Now, I want, or we should make Jakti as a symbol of our genocide, which is present there. It is there. See, all over, we're talking about Holocaust, we're talking about museums. There cannot be a bigger museum than Jakti camp, which reflects our genocide, which reflects our ethnic cleansing and everything. So if there can be a Jallianwala Bagh, where the names of all the victims have been written, Jakti camp should be the focus of the entire community. Entire world should look at Jakti as a symbol of our genocide, a symbol of our ethnic cleansing. And the pain which you have gone through, the entire journey which you have gone through 1989 to till this 32 years, will be reflected in Jakti camp. People all over the world are there. We all know what happened and what not happened and all that. If the entire community, we know the way they can be brought in to focus. The focus light should be on Jakti, and entire world should, and we should see to it the entire world should start talking about Jakti. If you want to keep reminding people that what happened to us, let us pictorially, image-wise, everything should be concentration there, because you have cases there, you have people there, and they are there living in a pathetic condition. And the way, I also want to compliment KOA, the way Archana ji and the entire team worked during this pandemic for Jakti camp. So I personally feel, as a filmmaker, as a creative person, I believe in visuals. I believe in images. Let us make Jakti as a symbol of our genocide and exodus, and let's not divert ourselves to other places and all that. And I'm sure if Jallianwala Bagh can have a symbol, why not?
Taken. I think your point is taken. So I think I should
excellent thought. Excellent.
One more, Sanjay, okay. One more thing.
Okay.
I want we should also keep, and we are doing it. We should also keep our artists, our makers, the kind of contributions they have done to our community, whether it's Pandit Bhajan Sapuri ji, his son Abhay, Kailash ji, Aarti Tikku, Rita Kaul, Rija. And one more thing, which I want to really reiterate and underline. A greatest achievement of Ramesh Hanglu in creating a community radio called Radio Sharda. You know what kind of achievement that creating of Radio Sharda is? So if Radio Sharda can be created immediately after Exodus, the community has been together because of Radio Sharda. Our community should talk about him. We should talk about Radio Sharda. It was the biggest savior. We didn't pick up the guns. We didn't pick up bullets. We didn't fire. We didn't kill people. We have to create, such things which Ramesh Hanglu created as Radio Sharda. It kept the community together. It has played a very important role as far as our togetherness.
Here's your point taken. I'll have to interrupt you. So I think if somebody can go back to the 10-20 year thing, Vijayji, you want to take a crack at that? Next 20 years?
Sure. I'm really, if you historically look at all the exoduses that have taken place, there's one major difference, but let me first talk about that. The fact is, in all of those exoduses, really, other than perhaps the second one, when some people return, but in most cases, actually, people have not returned back because they always find better opportunities, better living, much more secure life with dignity. I mean, can you imagine if you were in Afghan rule? I don't know how many of Kashmiri Pandits know this. In Afghan rule, they could take 2 or 3 of you, anybody could pick you up, though the king was, Mr. Khan was, the Aziz Khan was the Sultan or governor of Afghanistan. When he had a boring time, he would take a couple of Kashmiri Pandits. They would put a ledge on top of the mud, ledge with basically pieces on top of them, and to the dull, and then they would ask people to go and see who shoots that machwar, so that the whole thing will come on his face, and after that they would drown them. Similarly, when they were on the street, if you were an able or capable Kashmiri Pandit man, anybody could tell you, hey, I give me a ride, and they could actually ride on their shoulders and walk to the next spot. So Kashmiri Pandits have gone through hell. I mean, in that characteristic today is much, it's still kindergarten variety compared to what they have gone through in the past. So it's very difficult for them to really come back. Now, what is different today, of course, is that all those previous exoduses took place in the 1,000 years that India was not under its own, under its indigenous rule. What makes this exodus different, as Sushilji and others have said, this has basically happened when it's our own, our own people are running the country. And so to what extent will there be a difference? I am not that positive. I feel like at the end, it will be like, as Ashokji said, it'll be a radio, Sharda radio and other things that will basically keep us connected to the Kashmir Valley, and people will most likely be wherever they are. And we will have to be thinking in terms of, creating these memory boxes and keeping them going. I don't see really a large prospect of people returning to the valley.
Okay. Archana, sorry, Arti, you want to say something in next 20 years, what you would like to see to happen? We'll be around, hopefully.
Well, you can blame my idealism perhaps to either my ignorance or to my age, but I am not as pessimistic as the rest of our seniors in this panel. I think there is hope, and the hope is simply because Article 370 is history, Article 35A is history, and I'm imagining Kashmir to be like any other part of India in the next 20 years. I'm imagining Kashmir to be open to the rest of the country, as the rest of the country has been open to Kashmir. I am also imagining Kashmir to have a far more pluralistic demographic than it has been in the entire history of its, in its entire history. And I'm also imagining that people, not just Kashmiri Pandits, maybe not the first generation displaced Pandits, maybe not the second generation displaced Pandits, but perhaps the third generation displaced Pandits will see a route back to home, because if Kashmir, as and when, and I'm very positive about this, that Kashmir will become pluralistic. Kashmir is not going to be a homogeneous entity which successive governments allowed deliberately, and a lot of vested interests deliberately allowed Kashmir to become homogeneous and a Muslim-dominated region. I think that is going to change, and it will, I think, it's not only connected to Kashmiri Pandits. The future of Kashmir's demographic is also connected to the rest of the country. And I think the strategists, the security experts, and leaders of India will recognize that. And I think some of them already recognize that it is very important for India, if it foresees itself as a power, if it foresees itself as a civilization, then it's very important that Kashmir has the demographic that India has, which is essentially a diverse demographic, a microcosm of plurality. And therefore, I think along with the rest of Indians, Kashmiri Pandits sooner or later will return. But of course, before that, in next 10, 20 years, I'm very hopeful that India as a civilization will also acknowledge the truth about the exodus, the genocide of Kashmiri Hindus. Because as Sushilji said, it is very important that we are seen as a part of the larger Hindu community and not seen as just a small, insignificant, minuscule minority, indigenous minority of Kashmir. And third point, say that constitution and legislation has automatically and has already, in fact, taken steps in that direction. We have some of the amendments which Dr. Sazabal referred to as well. Those amendments, for example, the domicile, domicile law, the amendments made in that, the Land Amendment Act, those will pave the way for the change, that the transformation that we want to see in Kashmir. So I'm hopeful you can dismiss it, but
No, I definitely like the way you answered the question, and I think you definitely presented your perspective in 20 years, and I would also like to hope and be cautiously optimistic on that. There are a lot of questions that are coming, but
So
many.
Sanjay, I just want to make a comment. I think I'm going to bet my dollar on Aarti.
Yes.
I hope that the gentlemen don't, take offense to that. But I think that her perspective is very pragmatic. I think in 20, 30 years, this is what Kashmir is going to be. Very pluralistic. The demographics will change, and Kashmiri Pandits probably will be a part of that demographic.
Yeah. So thanks, Archana. And there are a lot of questions, but the time is a little bit.
Yes, we have to wrap it up.
So we have to wrap it up. So
yes, Sanjay, we have to. I'm so sorry to
I know.
Cut it short, but we have had a very interesting, conversations for the past 2 hours. I think that we have to unfortunately wrap it up. Unless someone has to make a very quick comment, maybe another minute or so, we would like to wrap it up.
If somebody wants to make a comment in a minute, I have this question, which I think is very straightforward, very technical. And the question is, does Kashmiri Hindu genocide fall within the UN definition of genocide? Can we? No, it does not. I think so.
Yes, it does.
Oh, it does?
It does.
Yeah, but let me
Yes,
do an
absolutely.
elaboration. Let me give an elaboration. The definition of genocide by the UN is a political decision. It is not a technical decision. Technically, you can obviously, our National Human Rights Commission has already said in 1999 that what happened to Kashmiri Pandits was akin to genocide. So we have Kofi Annan saying in 2004 that not Kashmiri Pandit, but he was making a general statement, but when you have a targeted killings on the basis of change religion, you are looking at the contours of a genocide. So technical definition, I think probably meets it, but actually will it be declared a genocide? That's a different thing. That's a very, very political decision. I mean, the United States has spent almost $300 million, quite frankly, in getting Myanmar in these Rohingyas, getting them declared as a genocide for which the Myanmar army should be. They have not been. So it goes through Security Council. It's got all kinds of hoops. It's not that easy.
Okay, thank you.
It took 100 years for Armenian genocide to be recognized by US. 100 years.
And it's still not recognized by the UN, by the way.
No, but US has very clearly and unequivocally called it a genocide 100 years after it happened.
Because the repercussions and benefits are humongous of that, right? Those are the complicated reasons. Once they do it, then a lot of things have to fall in place. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Well, as I said, at the end, when they have to vote, the permanent members of the Security Council vote on it.
Yeah.
So it's a recommendation made by a committee, but they vote on it.
I think
you guys have all answered your own question. Will it ever be declared a genocide? It will not. So
we don't know that. Not in our lifetime.
There you go.
Sanjay, we have to.
I'm coming to that.
Wrapping it. Thank you.
So a big thank you to all the panelists and listeners from all over the world joining. You've been a great audience. I wish I could take more questions. Special thanks to our teams here who have helped us. And we will conclude today's event with a priceless and a wonderful rendition of Lalwak by none other than Rakesh Kaul. Rakesh is our star from New Jersey. And a final vote of thanks by Archana ji. Rakesh needs no introduction. And, I just want to say one thing. He grew up in Kashmir and music has been his passion since he was a child. And the forced exodus from the motherland has been an extremely painful event, but it has brought him closer to the Sufi Kashmiri poetry and music. And with that, I will give to my dear friend and a New Jersey buddy, Rakesh Kaul. Rakesh, please take.
Thank you. Thank you so much. First of all, I'm so honored to be here with such esteemed panel. And, I was just quietly listening because there's so much to learn from everybody and to listen to everybody that, we look up to and who have been our voice back home or even here to Dr. Sazal. I'm going to be reciting a few lalwaks, and for folks who are not from Kashmir, and I see there are not many people today. First of all, namaskar to all the elders and to brothers and sisters and friends. What are lalwaks? So lalwaks is basically poetry that came from our Lal Ded, the mother Lalla, who emerged around the end of the 13th century, when actually the valley had started going through the turmoil that we see even today. And she was the one who was the greatest Shaivite philosopher, Shaivite thinker, a great Kashmiri poet. I want to emphasize on that, because till then we were our official language, our writings, literature, poetry, dramas, Shiva philosophy, everything was in Sanskrit. She took the transition from Sanskrit to Kashmiri, and I think there is a reason for that. And with her mystical powers, I think she at some point realized that, and she could see the whole spiritual and cultural fabric of Kashmir was being decimated by the invaders at that time. That was the time when the Sanskrit was taken away, the temples had started being broken. She realized perhaps that, there is going to be decades, hundreds of years that community will have to go through turmoil, and all the teachings of Shiva philosophy through Abhinav Gupta and all those great teachers, they're not going to be readily available through those teachers, because the community is going to be in turmoil. And the community will never have access to those teachings because, it's a day-to-day survival. So what she does, she brings out she takes all these Shaivite philosophies like a garland of flowers, and she takes out the nectar from these flowers and pours it for us through her walks. That's the only way I can say that. And she pours it through her walks, which are full of Kashmiri Shaivism philosophy. And the fact that, if you read these walks, she realizes that it's what Dr. Sazal was saying, that going to temple was there was a time when even people could not even go to a temple. They were like, as I said, the survival was the greatest thing. So what does she say in the walks? So there is Salunchi Wuzumalatatratai. Salunchi Wuzumaltatratai Madinanche Gatai. And then she says, Nerunchi Gratapanai Adamali Meli Santosh. So which tells you that you have to go through turmoil, lightnings, and so many painful journeys, but you will prevail. I want to recite few lalwaks because that's what I do. But I
Cannot hear you.
so I'm not going to be using the mic now, so I'll. So she gives you these beautiful tools which were relevant then, 700 years back, and which are still relevant today and will be relevant forever, because she gives you the tools of Shivite philosophy, where she tells you this is basically for your self-realization. She tells you, Akui Omkar Akui Omkarius na bidare Kumbai Brahmananda Sungare Suyak Manthar Chatasthave Tasas Manthar Kya Kare Gagan Titsui Bhutal Titsui Sui Chuk Den Pavan Taira Arg Sandun Poshipon Titsui Sui Chuk Sorui Selag Zikya Dam Dam Kurna Damanali Prazulyom Daptanane Yamza Andarim Prakash Andarim Prakash Nyabar Tsotum Gati Rotum Tukarma Stha Ami Pan Sadras Navichas Laman Karboz Daimyon Mitidita Amen Taken Poison Shaman Zuchung Brahman Gar Gatsha Zuchung Brahman Gar Gatsha Gar Gatsha Gar Gatsha. And then to end it, Panas lagi through dukh Metse sara Lusundo Panas manzili Panas manzili Dut makmitzi Mitzet panas Dutung cho. So I could go on and on and on and explain the meaning of each lalwak, which is very profound and it's the beginning for any seeker to access the Shiva code, okay, and to access the Shiva code and Kashmiri Shaivism. The self-realization. It's also panas nish ruduks mitsui. So you are always with me, and I was seeking you outside and looking out day and night. Finally, when I realized you within me, I drowned in that as, ecstasy. And, I didn't even know who was who in that, in that ecstasy. So there's a lot, Zuchum Brahman Gargatsa. I have a last thought for that. I don't want to demean it with just a physical home. It's basically, we all have to think that Kashmir is our spiritual center. For all of us, more than home, it has been the spiritual center, cradle for the entire Indian nation, where all great thinkers, spiritual thinkers came and needed to get validated. For us, it's our home. We have been blessed to be born there, but unfortunately, what has happened? But we need to connect to our spiritual. And that's what Zuchum Raman Gargatsa, it's not physical. I don't want to reduce it to just physical home. It is our spiritual. And with that,
Absolutely.
And I want to thank all of you. And it has been wonderful listening to all of you. God bless you all.
Thank you, Rakesh. Thank you. We could hear the Lalwaks all night long, but unfortunately, the program has already basically, we are going to midnight now. It has been a very engaging and scintillating discussion. We've had our esteemed guests have kept us mesmerized with the knowledge that they shared and their experiences and whatnot. I think that everyone has been glued to their seats and listening to all the discussion and back and forth that we had today. A lot to take from this program. Of course, I'm going to be briefly talking about the points that we touched on. I think for me, the takeaways were a few important ones. That one, awareness campaign has to go on. The second thing is that we have yet to get any kind of collective justice. We still are not sure why the perpetrators who killed, who are on record killing so many Kashmiri Pandits, are still roaming around free. The question of genocide has not been addressed, and not sure if it will be addressed in any near future. Keeping our story alive. I liked Ashokji's advice on social media, engaging and utilizing social media to our benefit. I think that's a wonderful idea. Engaging youth, and RTG's point that speaking to youth in a candid, frank manner and telling them about our stories, the truth, the reality of our brutalities happening against us. They have to understand the burden of our pain and suffering so that they will tomorrow talk about the same. I love the idea of making, a museum in Jagti camp, which should be our Jallianwala Bagh. And recently in my visit to Jammu, I did visit Jagti, and I'm very close to people in Jagti. We do a lot of work in Jagti. So that is a fantastic idea, Ashokji. Really love that idea. I do also want to touch on two other points. One is acknowledging the artists who have carried the baton of our culture and heritage for the last 30 years, and that RTG is one of the legends. We did have Bhajan Sopori ji this year on the virtual camp, and he did a fantastic 1-hour program wherein he, had the songs that he has played through his career in the Radio Kashmir area, in the Radio Kashmir, and also the background music that he has given for Bumbro Yambarzal and all those fantastic programs. But Ramesh Hanglu, yes, he's a person really to be admired. The way he has created the Radio Sharda single-handedly, immediately after migration, when there was like really he didn't have any directions. He didn't have any person telling them how to do it. And of course there was hardly any money in it. But I also had a conversation with him for about an hour in my recent visit. So yes, that is something that I think he has done a fantastic job for the community. I am going to conclude this program by just making a comment on the recent Kashmir files. I want to thank Vivek Agnihotri and his team for doing a fantastic job and bringing our stories to the world. He has done our community a great service. With that, I'm going to start thanking people. First of all, our panelists, our wonderful, wonderful panelists who raised the bar of discussion. And since this is our first ZoomDub program, I can only imagine the subsequent programs are going to be equally engaging. So thank you, Sushil ji, thank you, Vijay ji, thank you, Ashok ji, thank you, Aarti. Especially thanks to you because you were sick and we had to wake you up in the morning. I'm so sorry that we were inconvenient, we created inconvenience to you. I hope you feel better soon. Thanks to Meena, of course, thanks to our Aarti Tikku from Boston and Rakesh ji. I do want to thank my own team, of course, Sanjay ji for doing a fantastic job as a moderator, Indu ji, Neetu ji, who in the background have worked so hard to put this program together, and of course Anil ji, my secretary, who is always behind the scenes working very hard. Finally, thank you to the audience for staying with us for at least, I think, about 3 hours. I did not think the program will go this long, but it did. I think that it was because of the audience and the engagement that the debate and our discussion went so long. And I'm sure we have not answered all the questions, but hopefully we have answered most of them. So with that, I thank you and also want to inform you that this program will continue in the February segment. We'll let you know the topic and hopefully you can join us again. With that,
I would like to thank you, Archana ji. Archana ji, I would like to thank you.
So
Your
nice.
dynamism and your constant effort to do something good for the community.
Thank you, Ashok ji.
More power to you, more power to KOA, Archana ji.
Thank you,
for
Sushil
many
ji.
more programs to come.
Thank you,
Yes.
Sushil ji. I promise there'll be many more programs, many more people coming on our programs with a variety of different thought processes so that we can have these debates and discussions and move our community intellectually forward as well so that they will be engaged in these discussions. So with that, I thank all of you. Namaskar, and it'll be midnight here soon and a great morning for folks in India. Namaskar.
Thank you. Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Thank you. Thank you.